Cheryl, 3 Pat.
Thank you. Cheryl will be the Vice President. I'll open the floor for nominations for the position of Secretary of the Association. Cheryl.
Nominate Colette Horn for the position of Secretary.
Other nominations? Seeing none and being consistent with the other position, I'd like everybody to at least record their vote. Confident we can move on. So I will open the floor for nominations for the position of Treasurer. Brett.
I'll nominate Pat to continue as treasurer.
Other nominations? Seeing none, follow the same process, please. Record your vote. Okay, so now, as you know, officially we've assigned all of the officers for the board for the upcoming year. We'll move into appointments for the following positions. The first appointment we need to address is Assistant Treasurer.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order, I would like our Assistant Secretary to announce the votes of the Treasurer appointment.
Secretary was unanimous for Colette, and
I didn't hear that. Somebody nominate somebody or appoint or whatever?
Pat, Michelle stated that the selection of Colette as Secretary was unanimous.
Oh, okay, okay.
and for Treasurer, I have 5 in favor of Pat, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
All right, and the vote for Treasurer was 5 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain. So Pat, you remain as Treasurer. Thank you. I want to thank those who are now holding positions. You know, again, moving forward, this is the team we're assembling. This is, you know, what we can do collectively to move forward, and I think we've got, let's get off on the right foot. So back to the meeting agenda again for appointment for Assistant Treasurer. I will entertain some suggestions to fill that position for appointment. Brett.
I'm going to request that both Gene Ringsdorf and John Viola continue with the 2 assistant treasurers we have appointed coming in for this meeting.
Any other potential candidates for appointment? Any discussion?
I fully agree on those 2 appointments.
All right, I'd like to take a vote on accepting both Gene Ringsdorf and John Viola as assistant treasurers of the organization. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
7-0. The next appointment is for the position of the recording assistant secretary and timekeeper. I'll open the floor for candidates for that appointment. Brett.
I would make the motion to have Michelle Bennett continue as the recording assistant secretary and timekeeper.
Any other candidates for consideration? All those in favor of Michelle Bennett as the recording assistant secretary and timekeeper for the association. Please indicate your vote. Aye. Pat?
Pat, you there?
Did you hear that one?
Yes, we
Yeah,
did, thank you.
okay. Good. Okay. I left the appointment for legal counsel on the agenda as it has been left on the agenda for the past couple of years, although we do not need to make an appointment as we do already have general counsel for the association. It will remain Lurch, Early, and Brewer. So just a point of information for you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment on that, if I
Go
may.
ahead.
As we all know, last year, the board passed a motion favoring 3 different legal firms be selected for a variety of legal services to the association. Over the course of last year, most of that work really has been given to our current legal counsel, Lurch. In reviewing the contract, I observed that that contract has been signed to extend till April 30th of 2018. However, I would like to remind the board that we have passed a motion which calls for use of more than one legal firm, depending upon the subject matter requiring legal assistance, the costs associated with such service. So I would like to ask the board that when the new GM takes over, is that we revisit what is now an open item with regard to finding 2 other legal firms as per our approved motion, and making sure that we can get a better, more cost-effective legal services going forward.
So, no, thank you. I think that would be a topic that we should, at the very least, have on the agenda for our first full board meeting. Unless the board is, reluctant to do so, I think it's probably a discussion worth having. So, point well taken.
Great, thanks.
I also left the item for auditors on the agenda as in the same fashion with the legal counsel. We already have an auditing firm, and it's SC&H, and we will leave the auditing firm in place as our auditing firm going forward. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to make the same remark, similar remark. The legal firm has been hired for a current fiscal year, and it does not automatically renew for the following years. I plan to introduce a motion at the next board regular meeting to seek auditing services. The reason being is that I have observed in reviewing bids for the previous auditing service that we selected a firm that's 50% more than 2 other bids. At the time the vote was casted by board in February, I did not observe that discussion taking place or that information being provided to the board. So my intention again is at the next meeting to put a motion forward for a competitive bid for the auditing service.
So noted. I'll open the floor up for the appointment of the position of parliamentarian. Accepting any candidates for that role. Cheryl.
I would recommend Slobodan for that position.
Any other?
Cheryl, I didn't hear Cheryl.
Pat, Cheryl nominated Slobodan. Are there any other candidates for consideration for appointment?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to respectfully decline the nomination.
So noted. Floor is now back open for candidates for the appointment of parliamentarian. Cheryl.
Since he declined, I would nominate Colette for that position.
Are there any other nominations for, or appointments for the parliamentarian? Brett.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that one either.
Pat, Cheryl nominated Colette as a candidate for parliamentarian. Brett.
Okay.
As Mr. Nepper and Mr. Reynolds are present at most board meetings and have an intrinsic history with the board and its meetings, if either would accept, I would put out the nomination to either of those parties.
I will not.
Actually, I think Brett actually brings up a good point. We've traditionally had someone on the board as parliamentarian, but I don't believe that is a requirement. So if there's someone in the community that has the organizational skills, the understanding of Robert's Rules of Order, I certainly think that would one would be entertained if they were so inclined to look at that as a potential position. But as of right now, we have one candidate for appointment. And seeing that there are any more, then I would say let's please take a vote on the appointment of Colette as parliamentarian. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Public comments. Please make sure you state your name and your address. Thank you.
Full of those things, full of those guys. I'll be here, and I want nobody to interfere with me. You have seen my letter in the paper. I'll be humiliated by a board member to tell the people not to vote for her. And she sent the police to my house. We got a Gestapo system here. I come here and I speak up. This lady owes me apologize. I have nothing done wrong to her. Send the police to my house? Is that what Ocean Pine is? Did we live in a Gestapo system? And then is a board member? This is a board member, comes all this title, I'm doctor this and doctor this, I'm tired of it. She owes me apologize. And if she don't, she gonna regret it. You're out of order.
That's a threat.
That's okay.
That's a threat.
Other public comments?
Good morning, and let me congratulate each of you, opening up a new session, a new season. And as Tom has said, divisiveness is left, and happiness is here. My name is John Roeder. I live at 186 Sandy Hook Road. I want to talk to you about Section 2 and Section 3 and drainage. First, I want to give you a handout.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I'd like to ask you to imagine a large tree. We have lots of big gum trees here. Now think about the big limbs and leaves and things at the top, a big trunk coming down. And I want to tell you a story about that. Sprinkle a little rain on the top. That's in section 2 and section 3. Nature will take care of giving us that rain, sometimes too much. Rain comes out the bottom of this tree that I'm trying to have you imagine. And that's on Beecham Road. Goes across Beecham, underneath Beecham Road, and goes on into River Run and eventually St. Martin's River. So you've got that picture that I'm trying to give to you, where it comes in, section 2, section 3, works its way through, and goes out. So I want you to think about street drains. Those are the drains alongside the streets, pavement. I want you to think about throughway drains. Those are the big drains, 5 feet across, 5 feet deep, no cover, open. I want you to think about pipes, sometimes called culverts. Some are under driveways, and others are under streets. I want you to think about pipes to flow water. And I want you to think about that you don't want those pipes to get clogged up with debris. So, let me move on to factual things now. As I said, I live in Section 3. I move around Section 2 on occasion. Recently, the big rain, just a couple weeks ago, flooding at Burr Hill and Canal, that big section right there, it floods frequently, that area. That's in Section 2. That's part of this big tree I was telling you about that has its limbs spread out across Section 2. It works its way through the drainage. Some drainage is small, some drainage is big. All of it really is important for the picture. Periodic maintenance of input areas at pipe, up the pipe at 82 Sandy Hook, for example. That in that particular part is at the base of the tree as it enters the limbs, as it enters into the big drainage pond, water control pond of Bainbridge. But frequently over the past time, that has been a stoppage point because the drainage, the junk accumulation of debris hasn't been cleaned out. So think about periodic maintenance. The thing that I want you to also think about is the size of the pipe. You know, some pipes were put in the origin to make up the first years of Ocean Pines were not correctly sized. They were put in perhaps because that was the pipe that was available, I don't know. But at any rate, a pipe needs to be big enough so that it will flow water under a duress condition, and it will also not accumulate debris, consequently blocking itself, stopping and backing up water tremendously. So just think about those things. Section 3, we moved out of Section 2. We're in Section 3 now. The donut hole. Do you know what the donut hole is? Tom knows it.
I do not.
Okay, I'll tell you. If you come in off of the Parkway and you come in on Beacon Hill, go a short distance, half a block, and you're in the donut hole. Now, if you were there 2 weeks ago, your car probably couldn't get through it. And that's a random thing that happens there every time we have a big rain. Now, why does it happen? It takes, I walked that little distance yesterday going up to where it normally should drain. If you go halfway distance, pipe under one of the driveways is 2/3 blocked with dirt and junk. Maybe that's why it backs up. But it's probably a more complicated story than what I'm saying, because I don't really know the answer. But it's certainly worth looking at professionally. The flooding in the rear of homes facing Beacon Hill and Sandy Hook. You've got Beacon Hill, you've got Sandy Hook, houses that in the back, they traditionally have had flooding problems. One of those particular areas has been corrected by a very creative homeowner. Now, by creating a solution to his house's problem, he's whipped out a problem on the road. So what I'm trying to say is that water will find its natural spot, and consequently, you have to consider the whole picture.
Mr. Rhoda, thank you. I do have to be cognizant of the 5-minute time limit for public comments.
And do you think that I have exceeded that?
Just about.
Very good. Well, I will stop,
But,
because I have given you a picture, and I will ask you to give that some thought. I've left you the document
Yeah,
that has all the facts,
Very good. This is-
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Other public comments?
Good morning. My name is Ted Arano, 51 Quarterstaff Place, Ocean Pines, Maryland. I'll try to make this very brief. And contrary to what some of the people think, I'm not beating a dead horse. And those people know who they are. My name is Ted Arano, member of the Ocean Pines Association. I'm writing, this is a letter that I've written to a couple of the newspapers. I'm writing this to inform the other members of the way our rights were denied at the annual meeting of the association members. I came to the meeting to amend the agenda under which our book of resolutions B-03 I had every right to do. I waited until the proper time to request that the agenda be changed. I raised my hand, and after the presiding officer, Mr. Dave Stevens, asked to adopt the agenda. I raised my hand, proceeded to the mic, identified who I was, where I lived as required. I then began to ask that the agenda be amended to include a motion. I was told by Mr. Stevens that I was out of order and could not amend the agenda. At this time I disagreed with him, and then the parliamentarian, the new Ocean Pines attorney, Jeremy Tucker, agreed with Mr. Stevens. According to the, God, my hand shakes. According to the board resolution B-03 regarding the annual meeting points of order, the presiding officer's decision on a point of order shall be final unless overruled by a majority vote of the voting members present in person. A vote should have been ordered by Mr. Stevens, which he did not do, and continued to say I was out of order. It was the wrong decision. It left me, excuse me, it left me no option but to go back to my seat as I was told. As I was told by other members that I could bring up my motion in new business, but as the meeting went on, they were rushing to get the election results, that when new business came up, Mr. Stevens said none so fast, I couldn't get up fast enough to try to make my motion. What I find interesting is when the resolution B-03, meetings of the association, was adopted by the board of directors on November 19th, 2008, Mr. Stevens was the president of the board. I sent a message to Ocean Pines Forum, and here are two of the responses from current board members. This is addressed to Joe. While we certainly cannot do anything to change what transpired at the meeting on Saturday, the takeaway is to ensure we do allow motions from the floor at the next and subsequent annual meetings. Doug, Mr. Park. The other response, Mr. Arano, I offer you my sincere apology for the way your request of amending the agenda to include your motion was handled by Dave Stevens, the presiding officer of the members' annual meeting. The situation was further complicated by the opinion offered by the association's legal counsel, who improperly and prematurely commented on the content of your motion. I wanted to intervene, but as a sitting board member, it would have been inappropriate for me to do so. I was hoping that the homeowners present, familiar with the rules, came to your rescue. I hope a lesson learned for all, homeowners and board members, that annual meeting is the members' meetings, and that you, the homeowners, have a final say for everything that takes place on that day, including the agenda. Respectfully yours, Slobodan. I'd like to thank all concerned and mention that those who want to read this resolution B03, go to the Ocean Pines website and look up the book of resolution. Thanks again, Ted Arado.
Other public comments?
My name is Rhonda Holson. I live at 22 Mobius Drive, and I've been flooded 3 times in 6 years. My first floor, not talking right?
A little closer to the mic.
Better? Usually I'm too loud. I usually don't need a microphone. Anyway, Mr. Roeder started this, said about section 2 and section 3. I live in section 6. My home is one of the oldest homes in Ocean Pines. The other homes behind us have been built after. We are like 40-some years old. The other homes have been done and none of the drainage has been changed. And I just want it looked into. Now my foundation is cracked. I may not have a home. So something has to be done, not just for me, for everybody. Something has to be done. It's heartbreaking when I walk down those steps again. So please consider having somebody come in. The drainage has got to be fixed. Thank you.
Other public comments?
Terry Carrick, 76 Boston Drive. We are lucky enough not to have a great deal of flooding. However, whenever we have a lot of rain, the drains don't work right because, as Mr. Roeder said, the drainage ditches are clogged, the pipes are clogged. We clean out ours, it goes as far as ours, then it backs up and it floods. We have a river running between both houses, which I'm sure is not good for our foundation or the people next to ours. People across the street, because it won't clear, theirs is like a lake. I don't understand why you can't come. If we complain, somebody comes and digs the ditches deeper.
Yeah.
Which, that doesn't make sense at all, because I thought it's supposed to drain off. So you need to come and clean everything out, all the clogs. Thank you.
Other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. New business. First item on our new business is establishing board meetings for the upcoming year. I certainly want everybody's input on the board. I think that there's been some sentiment in the community that there's benefit in having board meetings on a Saturday so that the non-full-time residents can sometimes attend that. I think we should take that into consideration as we're building the schedule. But I'm open to any and all suggestions on how we want to craft our schedule. Cheryl.
In addition to Saturdays, we might want to consider evening meetings as another way of encouraging homeowners who might be employed full-time to be able to attend a meeting or watch it from their home once they get, away from their work.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so I want to also float the idea, traditionally this has been done in the past as a board orientation meeting soon after the election. I'd like to continue that meeting because I think we could get very much benefit from that. Tom was gracious enough to share some board orientation information from, 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is a great document to start with, and I think we should at the very least schedule the board orientation meeting. I believe traditionally, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd say pretty much a full day meeting, that we have a full agenda not only of what's on this, but the understanding of roles and duties of board members and a general review of the the tenets that are in this document. So I'd like to at least entertain Yeah, 2 days is a lot to ask. I think we can cover it in a day, and I'd ask for some consideration, but I do think we should schedule that sooner rather than later. Any concern, any discussion? Brett?
Wait,
All right, hold on. Pat, go ahead.
Sorry. I think it's a great idea and much needed. One thing I would like to have to offer for that meeting is that we, maybe through our attorney, I'm not sure where, get a conflict of interest policy that each board member signs. It's something that I'm used to on other boards, and it just kind of highlights, and I think it's good for all of us, and it gives all of us a comfort level about the other board members, and gives us direction as a board member. They can be rather detailed or not. I think a little more detail on them was, highlighting specific relationships that are considered conflicts of interest, others that aren't. But I'm sure we can get something from maybe Jeremy Tucker or Jim Moore. If everybody thinks I think it's a good idea. But I don't think we do that now. In fact, I know I haven't.
Pat, very good idea. I think we should absolutely do that, include that in our board orientation meeting. Any concern? Good, okay, we'll make sure that gets you, Brett?
I would make the recommendation that maybe we look at Friday the 15th for the orientation, and because we have a new general manager coming on board, that we incorporate the general manager into the orientation, because I believe he's going to need somewhat of the same level of orientation as well, and I think it would allow us to set a good framework of communications with the new general manager and help foster a more productive relationship at the onset of his tenure here with Ocean Pines.
Comments?
I'd like to push it off a little bit. I have a pre-planned visit from out-of-town guests that week, and I'd rather not spend a whole day of their visit working.
When would be the...
I cannot do the 15th at all. I have a scheduled college thing with my granddaughter.
So, two questions come to mind. I need some advice here. Number one, should we have an official board meeting before the new GM comes on board or after? I'm open to suggestions on that. Should we have the board orientation meeting before the new GM comes on or after? I think it's an open discussion. We clearly, and of course, hopefully the obvious question is, should we have the board orientation meeting first before we conduct any additional business? In other words, if pushing off an official board meeting, are we delaying anything that needs action at this point? Brett?
I would say that I think the orientation should come before the first board meeting, just so we can kind of get our mode of operations between all of us in place before we go into a meeting, at least a formal meeting. If we have an issue that does require attention, we always have the ability to call a special meeting, and I think that was done last year, and I think if we need to, we utilize that this year. And I would say I think that at this point there's not a urgency with any issue, because the open issues still have information that's required, I think, before the board can make decisions to bring them to a meeting. So, in looking at the conflicts, on John's first week, maybe we look at that next week for orientation and then go to the end of the month for our first board meeting.
Other comments on that? Tom?
Yeah, I believe that the GM should be at the orientation meeting, and maybe we could put it off to the following Friday.
Friday.
Which would be the 22nd.
I was going to suggest sooner.
Monday the 18th.
Can you do Monday?
I could do Friday the 8th.
Oh, no, I want the GM, I would like the GM to be there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think we're in agreement that we want the GM there. It sounds like we've got two options. One would be the 18th, which is Monday. The second would be the 22nd, which is that Friday. Any concern about that?
Friday.
Pat, what's that schedule? Look like on your schedule.
The 22nd works for me. That works for others. And this is for the orientation meeting?
Correct. All right, folks, any concern?
My preference is Monday the 18th. Is she available on the 18th?
Pat, are you available Monday the 18th?
Oh, you can't do that? Never mind.
I can't do the 18th.
Oh, never mind. Never
I
mind.
can do the 22nd.
All right, so being, unless there's any dissension, let's do it Friday the 22nd. Do we want to do 10 o'clock? Good for everybody? I'm an early riser, 8:30 is good for me, but.
Well, if we're doing all day for orientation, let's get started as early as possible,
Yeah.
so we can get done as early as
Yeah, I was
possible.
gonna say, you want to, let's, can we agree, is 8:30 unreasonable? I know, Cheryl.
Say,
Yeah, 8:30. I'm overruling. 8:30?
Okay.
All right, Michelle, could you please put that on our calendar? 8:30 on Friday, the 22nd, will be the board orientation meeting. Let's decide on a location. Any preference? Do we want to do it at the yacht club? Do we want to do it here? Do we want to do it somewhere else? Because in essence, and I believe, and guys correct me if I'm wrong, it's somewhat of a, I won't call it a retreat, but we clearly need to get away, get in a room, and kind of, basically get organized. And so I don't think there's a requirement for it to be here, although it does need to be a public meeting. I think that we could look at possibility of another location, and I'm open to any suggestions on that. Anybody have a strong feeling on where we should hold the meeting?
I'm okay with being here locally, as long as it's conducive to.
Give me a specific recommendation.
Well,
Spot.
Let me just see what we have available for rooms. If we can get a room blocked out here for the day, then we can just use this building, and if there's not a room available for the entire day, we'll move over to either the beach club or the yacht club.
Okay, Brett, so,
I'll get a room coordinated with Michelle, and we'll just provide notice back with a public notification.
okay. All right, so for the, for the membership, so as soon as we get a location, we'll make sure that everybody's aware of that. Thank you. Okay, so let's move forward with, now that we have a meeting scheduled on the 22nd, let's move forward to establishing a monthly schedule for that.
Like, you want to do the first board meeting?
Yeah, the first board meeting. So I guess the other side of this would be, how soon after the orientation meeting do we want to have our first official board meeting? Again, we'll have John Bailey on staff. We'll be coming off of an orientation with obviously some ideas, hopefully some direction. And are there any issues that we're aware of that would be affected by not having a first board meeting soon after the orientation meeting?
Why don't we just have it on Saturday, the 23rd?
September.
Yep.
All right, I have a suggestion for Saturday the 23rd. Discussion?
I'd like to push out to the next week, just because that's going to be taken. I mean, if our first board meeting starts out like any of our meetings from last year, there's going to be 2 full days tied up in the board in a row. And I'd like to have a little bit of time with my family.
Considerations. So now we're looking at perhaps the 30th?
The 29th or the 30th. Maybe Friday the 29th or Saturday the 30th.
Friday the 29th?
I'm okay with Saturday morning, the 30th.
Huh?
Either one is fine for me.
Pat, Saturday morning the 30th for the first business board meeting?
that works for,
Okay.
John, I will make one comment about that. We tried the Saturday meetings this past year to accommodate the weekenders and stuff, and the attendance didn't show that we got any more participants. So I'm not sure if Saturday is that important.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I think we can open the floor for this, but Gene, because it's you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Gene Rainstorm, Assistant Treasurer.
And welcome back, by the way. Glad to see you.
September at the beginning of the budget season, and we generally have a board meeting devoted strictly to establishing budget guidelines from the board to the GM. So, that meeting includes the Budget and Finance Advisory Committee, who submits to the board recommended guidelines that the board can consider morphing into guidelines they give to the GM. And the earlier that's done, the better off the whole staff is having the guidelines that the board wants, rather than wait for that to appear in December when they're near the end of their budget preparation.
So with that in mind, thank you, Gene. Thank you for the recommendation. So with that in mind, does that change our approach to the 23rd? Is that, I guess, my question? So, Pat, Gene suggested... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm guessing that it's the budget issue which popped into my mind once I realized where we were in the year. Was that his issue? it's late for the budget, by resolution when the budget and finance is supposed to make recommendation and with the GM and that kind of thing. I think we need to pay attention at this point to budget development for next year, even though I feel like it's forever in front of our budget that we, in front of our year end that we start. We have to have a finish for February or something. So anyway, I don't know if that's what Jean was mentioning or not.
Yeah, Pat, that's exactly what Jean was mentioning, and my question to the rest of the board is the 23rd of September too late to have the meeting that's going to be devoted to discussion on the upcoming budget? And I'm asking that to everyone.
I don't think so, just because the GM is just going to be starting. Now, I realize the board is going to look at it, from a certain angle with maybe, overview and recommendations for the development of the coming budget. It hasn't been as formal, years as I think it should be, coming from the board to the GM and from the finance committee to the board. Or timely, it's hard to get it because we have such a long lead for our budget process. I think that's fine if we really, pay attention to it, but kind of grind it out and make finance to give us their recommendations. When I'm back next week, I could get it the committee.
Very good. Okay, so it sounds like from our treasurer, the 23rd is doable. If we devote that meeting to the budget, I would also offer that if anything comes up that requires some immediate attention prior to that time, and as Brett had pointed out, we can also call for a special meeting if it's required. So unless the board has a concern about that, let's schedule our first official business meeting on the 23rd, which I believe is a Saturday, and we'll do 10 a.m. rather than 8:30, and we'll use that for not only budget but in case anything else comes up at the time. Fair enough? All right, so we're on board with the 23rd. Let's move into October. So, pardon?
In this room?
I suspect that what we'll need to do, I want to set aside the schedule first, and then we'll obviously look at the availability of rooms. I'm not going to make the assumption that this room will be available on every date we decide. So we'll set the calendar first, and then we'll obviously follow up with the location to make sure everybody's aware of that. All right, so the other question I'd ask is the cadence of monthly still agreeable to everybody? Is that something that is, I believe we have to have 6 meetings a year. I think 12, or personally, I think, because of all the work we have ahead of us, I think that the monthly cadence is certainly something we should consider keeping. All right, so I think that, so we're in agreement that we do it monthly. So now the question would be, what day do we want to set the October meeting?
When we did the schedule last year, if you recall, we looked at the consideration of really being like the last weekend of every month, so that we were able to have a meeting after the financials were out and the board could have input there. And I think the only deviation came into the November-December timeframe because that put us into the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. So in that period, we altered the schedule and did a meeting at the beginning of December, and I believe the first week of December, and did a mid-span meeting there. So I would recommend that we just maintain that same kind of pace from last year and timeline being the last weekend of the month for our meetings. And if it's Saturdays or Fridays or whatever, I think that's the big question.
Comments on that approach?
I think that's fine, but I would ask you to consider not necessarily having them all be Saturday meetings, but maybe a Thursday evening rather than all Saturdays.
So noted. All right, so with that in mind, it seems like we have consensus on the fact that we want to do it monthly. I like the idea of the last week of the month based on the financials coming out. So looking at October, we are looking at the 27th is a Friday, the 28th is a Saturday. How about, does the 27th look good on everybody's calendar? Just to do it as a Friday since the first meeting is going to be this Saturday?
27th.
October 27th.
An evening meeting? far?
Will be Alaska, so I probably call in because of the time in the morning.
All right, well, we'll take that into consideration, Pat, but I think, if we try to meet everybody's schedule, I think we'll be herding cats. So I think let's just establish something at this point and understand that, there will be times when not all of us can be here, because we could do this ad infinitum and not come up with a schedule that everybody can do that. So, I offer the Friday the 27th. As much as I think evening would be appropriate on a Friday, I'd rather do it during the day. 10 o'clock fine?
Yep.
All right, let's move into November. November 24th, obviously, is Thanksgiving. Do we want to wait until the November 30th, December 1st, or December 2nd? Also knowing that the end of December, we'll be in another quote-unquote holiday mode. Suggestions for a November meeting, prior to Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving?
I would say after Thanksgiving, maybe we could consider Thursday, the 30th as a weekend, but we're going to try to do meetings.
Okay. Thoughts on that proposed time and date? November 30th, which is a Thursday. We'll do it in the evening, 7 o'clock. Everybody okay? All right. 7. So 11:30. I'm sorry. Yeah, 11:30 at 7. All right, let's move to December. Last week would be the 29th. I suspect there's some travel issues there with people with availability. Perhaps we consider not having a meeting in December.
I prefer moving it into January, first week.
First week of January is better.
But is it the second week in January, we have a meeting for the budget?
Yeah, you had today's session.
So I would just push the meeting into whenever the budget session comes in for January. And we can conduct our board business and then move to the budget review.
Pat, did you hear Brett's suggestion?
And I agree, because we generally have several meetings for the budget, and it's probably the week of January 8th that it would fall. So you could work around that, Doug, if you choose to use that as an idea.
All right, what's the recommended day on the second week of January? Want to do it earlier in the week or want to do it later in the week?
Monday the 8th.
I hear Monday the 8th. Issue, concern? Anyone?
Gene, do you know what I don't remember off the top of my head what the requirement is for when the GM is supposed to present the budget?
It's usually sometime in February.
There's a date for the draft. Do you recall, Michelle?
I think the GM presents it to the board preliminarily and the budget finance committee early in January.
It's usually,
Go ahead, Pat.
is Jean answering?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Pat, please.
I mean, in the past, that week, January 8th is when we meet to discuss, and then it's with the board, like the finalization last year was around the 11th or 12th. I don't know that it is specific as to the day, unless Jean remembers an exact date. I think it's just in that, because what it drives is when it has to be to the community, I think. And every year I've been involved, which is the last couple of years, the initial meetings are that week of the 8th with a final meeting later. For example, last year, we met with the committee 10th to the 12th, or the committee met and then the board met the 28th of January, 27th of January to finalize the budget. That's what I have on my calendar from last year.
Yeah, FO2 just says early January, the general manager provides the board of directors and B&F committee the summary of the major budget items. So it doesn't specify a date in there. So I think the week of the 8th, then, I mean, as long as we're complying with the bylaws and resolutions, I think we're fine.
The only question I would have would be, do we have our board meeting prior to the discussions that the GM has with the Budget and Finance Committee, or after?
Yeah.
After?
Productive after, because
Right.
Budget and Finance Committee usually very definite, concrete recommendations that the board can, yes or no on kind of a thing.
All right. Okay, so I'll tell you what, let's tentatively set it for the week of the 8th. I think we need a little bit more detail, so let's do that, but just commit to the week of the 8th, and it'll materialize as soon as possible when we get a little more detail on that. So move on to February. So for meeting the second week in January, and we want to follow that cadence, do we still want to just move back to the next to last week in February, the 23rd and 24th?
Yeah, I would put it out there, because we have to have the budget approved by the 28th, and if we hold to the 23rd, 24th, that would be the right time to approve the budget as well.
All right, 23rd is a Friday, 24th is a Saturday. Pick one. Or I will.
24th.
Go for it.
24th, 10 o'clock. March. We can do it at the 23rd, 24th, or the 30th, 31st. Any preference?
What happened Thursday nights?
Yeah, let's do 29th. March 29th.
29th? All right, 29th,
7 p.m.
What time, 7 p.m.?
7 p.m. April.
What was that, March 29th?
29th at 7 p.m. It's a Thursday.
Okay.
April, let's go back to a Saturday meeting. Want to do the 28th?
Okay.
April 28th at 10?
10.
8:30, I mean 10. I'm an early riser, sorry, I get going at 5 a.m., let's go. All right, move into May, the 25th, 26th.
That would be, that's Memorial Day weekend, correct?
Oh, that's,
It is.
yeah.
So why don't we stay with Thursday night on, before Memorial Day, so we still are at
24th?
Yeah, give us time for financials to not interfere with the holiday weekend.
We okay with the 24th, Thursday?
Mm-hmm.
Thursday? Pat, Thursday? All right. 5/24 at 7 p.m. Move on to June. Week of the 22nd or 23rd. That's the Friday, Saturday. Questions, concerns?
20, what did you say, 23rd to Saturday?
23rd is Saturday. 23rd. All right, 6/23 at 10. And the last one will be July. The 27th and 28th is Friday, Saturday. 28th is your birthday. So we should not have a board meeting to
We did
celebrate
that
that.
this year.
Okay. Then I think we have.
Bringing the cake in.
Yeah.
We'll put it on
We
the
can have it
agenda.
catered. 27th then, it is. Friday the 27th, 10 o'clock. Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, moving on to the next item. I believe we've actually already discussed this, but just for recording purposes, just get affirmation from the board that we did discuss whether or not to hold a board orientation workshop. We indeed agreed on that, and we have a date set. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right, let's move on to the next item. Sensitive to the events with regard to the amount of rain we had and the inquiries we've received from a number of members, including some of the presentations from today, we felt it important as a board to reach out to other resources in the area and just get some input, just get a dialogue opened up with regard to the current state of affairs, alternatives, and just have those kinds of discussions, perhaps we can maybe make something as a sort of a forward-thinking approach to things. Now, we're not necessarily saying we have an answer, but the intent of this is to have a dialogue and at least keep the information going while it's fresh in our minds. So we've invited Laura Allen, who's the Berlin Town Administrator. She's graciously given up some of her time and has put together a little bit of an information presentation in regard to the drainage. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just give me a minute to get this set up.
Brett, you got everything
I think we
queued up there, ready to go?
I think we just turn it on. He went to sleep. Aha. I think I'll take the microphone because I think it'll make it easier for you to hear me. Can you hear me okay? So my name is Laura Allen. I'm the town administrator in Berlin, Maryland, which you know is voted America's coolest small town. So I like to tell people that makes me America's coolest small town administrator. I want to thank the board for allowing me to come and talk about one of our favorite topics in Berlin, which is stormwater. Can she hear me okay?
Pat, can you hear okay?
I cannot, I can't hear. I'm going to have to go off in about 15 minutes, so I don't know what to do.
right,
Can you make it so I can hear, or?
Well, Pat, I don't think there's anything we can do about the audio, so in the interest of time and courtesy out of your, perhaps you drop off, and then certainly the meeting is being recorded, so at your leisure you could pick up the presentation on the video recording. Right.
I think Charlie told me that you can take one of those mics off of there and give it to her and then pack her here. Where's Charlie?
Well, Pat also said she's got to leave in a couple of minutes anyway.
Well, she could be beginning of it,
Pat, your call. I don't think we can do anything audio-wise right now, but if you feel like it's more, proper for you to drop off, by all means, we accept that.
Okay, all right, I will see you all soon.
Yeah, and thank you for taking time out to attend today. We appreciate that.
Great, I'll go ahead and continue my presentation then. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for inviting me to talk about one of our favorite topics in Berlin, which is stormwater. And you'll notice that I've got the town of Berlin, but also EA Engineering, Science, and Technology. This is the contractor that we work with to do most of the stormwater work in town. And we've got some folks, Darl and Neil from EA here in the room. And I have their permission to use this PowerPoint in case anybody's wondering. So Berlin actually started tackling stormwater, I think, really in earnest maybe 10, 12 years ago. It's been a long-standing issue in the community, but it really came to the forefront. And, excuse me, and some of the comments we heard today were some of the comments that Berlin heard many years ago. And I've been with the town for about 4 years, so a lot of the work that the community has done predates my arrival, but I'll be telling you about that anyway. So there's a lot of history of flooding in Berlin, and again, about 2005, 2007, they worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to do a study of the water flows in the community and what the issues were, and that report came up with a number of recommendations. The town adopted stormwater management regulations. Historically, the county had been responsible for that, but they decided they wanted to do it a little bit differently, and so we took over responsibility for that activity. So we do our own stormwater management reviews, and in this case, we contract with EA to provide that technical assistance. We partnered with the University of Maryland in 2012, the Finance Center, to do a study. We were trying to figure out how we can create a stormwater utility. So Berlin actually has 4 utilities: water, stormwater, sewer, and electric. And we worked with the University of Maryland to come up with a financing mechanism to establish the utility. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then the utility itself was established in 2013. The way the financing component works is there is a stormwater fee that's attached to all of the property owners in town. Residential property owners pay $50 a year. Commercial property owners pay based on the amount of their impervious surface. So if you think about a large piece of land that's got a parking lot on it, if the parking lot covers all of the surface, then they're going to be paying more than that same size piece of land with a smaller parking lot on it. That's just a simple analogy. So commercial property owners pay based on the amount of impervious surface. Residential property owners pay based on the fact that it's $50, and just to give you a standard average for the community. And what the town did about 5 or 7 years ago, before this was established was reduce the property tax rates, in part so that when this was implemented, the net impact to the individual property owners was pretty much neutral, definitely neutral for the residents. It was a bit of a discount for commercial property owners, but not 100%. There was a lot of public outreach in this whole process, culminating in the creation of the stormwater utility. And a lot of the comments that we heard today in the room were the same, again, kind of comments that the council heard that motivated them to tackle this issue. And I want to give the town council and mayor a lot of credit. Without their leadership, it probably would not have happened. And they've stuck with this issue for a long time to make sure that it was done well. So lots of council meetings, we got a lot of public comment along the lines of what we heard today. We held town work sessions. So your structure of government's a little bit different than ours. In a work session, we can actually have the council meet in public, but public comment's not allowed. So the idea is you can observe them working in a public setting, but it's not the same type of interaction you would have in a normal council meeting. And we had the University of Maryland Finance Center help us with these meetings and provide information and help us identify priorities. What Berlin focuses on when it comes to stormwater management is the series of best practices here. And it's a little hard to read, but all you really need to know is we're all about best practices. There's lots of different ways of going about dealing with stormwater, and we look at the property, and to a certain extent, it's a case-by-case basis in terms of what we're going to be recommending or what we're going to be requiring on each of those pieces of property. So let's talk about some specific things that the town has done. There's a street in the residential area called West Street. It had a small culvert. I'm going to come over here and just point to this because I don't think the pointer's going to work. So in the circle up here, you can see a culvert that's got a lot of stuff around it that needs to be cleaned out. And this was the culvert before we improved it. Lower left-hand side is the expanded culvert, and we also put in some rocks on the side to shore up the side. And then for us, this is a special treat on the far right-hand side. That's where it's a little hard to see, but there's a blue heron in there. So for us, it was a combination of trying to address flooding, but also improving the water quality of our runoff. So Berlin is unique. Its waterways drain to both the coastal and the Chesapeake bays, and those bays are suffering. So part of what we're doing in this work is improving the quality, the water quality of our runoff. And this blue heron for us is proof that we're actually having that positive environmental impact. We've also put in a submerged gravel wetland. This was actually a project that our Public Works Department did without any contractual support. And essentially underneath the water, it's hard to see, but there's some piping that helps run the water underneath. So it collects, it's like a catchment basin. It collects, it hangs, it filters, and then it moves out over time. So for us, it's about creating additional capacity, not just in the culverts, move it under the road and through the system, but also creating things like this, or an offline wetland, which I'll talk about in a minute, to create additional capacity so it provides a filtration part and a place for the water to go rather than into somebody's garage or under somebody's home. So we created the stormwater utility in 2013. That utility generates about $170,000 a year. We have a couple of staff people attached to it and some equipment. So we do maintenance on the ditches and waterways in town. We have some stormwater ponds we're responsible for, and we maintain those. But I think more importantly, we've used that money for the utility as match when we go to apply for state and federal grants. And with the help of EA, we were extremely successful in obtaining almost $2 million worth of grant money to invest in capital projects. The town really was not going to be able to use $170,000 to do some significant capital projects that were needed. So we went to the state and the federal government, and again, I think we were pretty successful. $2 million is a pretty big number. So these were the priorities that were identified in the Army Corps of Engineers report. This is the order that the council decided to pursue the projects. One was Flower Street. It's on the east side of Berlin. There we did an expanded culvert project in an offline wetland, and I'll show you some pictures in a minute. Right now we're working on phase 2 at Hudson Branch, Williams Street. Again, it's going to be a culvert expansion project. We're going to make it a little bit wider so the water can travel through. And we're also going to create another much smaller offline wetland to create some additional capacity and also some filtration opportunities. Then we're going to take what's remaining of this $2 million worth of grants and go up into a neighborhood called Graham, Price, and Nelson. We're basically traveling along Hudson Branch, which runs west to east, but we're using our projects, or running our projects east to west. So we're going to take the balance of the grant money and run it up as far as we can into Graham, Price, and Nelson, with the recognition that we're probably not going to have enough money to deal with all of the things we would like to do there, but we're going to get as far as we can. Right now, we're moving into another round of funding for grants so we can finish off the work in that area. And then also tackle this last project, which is, we just sort of call it West Street at Abbey Lane. That alone is $2 million worth of work. And so we are working with EA to do another round of grant applications for West Street, as well as the balance of Graham, Price, and Nelson. And we're also looking for planning money because, as I mentioned, the study's probably about 10, 12 years old. And the question I posted to EA was, with all this capital investment, are those recommendations that were based in that study from 10 to 12 years ago, are they still valid? And we're not sure, so we're looking for some grant money, and we think it's out there, to do a study to determine what those priorities should be. Should they change? Should they remain the same? So here's the Flower Street Culvert and Wetland Project. In the upper left-hand corner is the crane that is carrying the culvert over into the area that's going to be inserted, and then at the bottom you can see the culvert and some gabion baskets that we're installing along the side to shore up. And then the upper right-hand corner is a photo of the offline wetland. I don't know if you're familiar with Berlin, but there is a multi-purpose building and a Head Start building. This is county property where we got an easement that sits behind it. It really wasn't being used for anything, and the county's letting us use it for $1, but they also get the credits off of the offline wetland in exchange. I also wanted to talk about community support because we could not have done this utility as successfully as we did. We got a few complaints after we put it in place from some property owners, but for the most part, people were pretty supportive. And I think it was a combination of, again, to be honest, the property tax adjustment, but also a very well-planned community outreach program that we did in partnership with the University of Maryland Coastal Bays, and Assateague Coastal Trust. Because again, while we're dealing with flooding, we're also trying to address the water quality issues. And in our community, the environmental aspects of the work that we do are extremely important. So we think part of the reason why people were willing to pay the fee was because they saw it as an investment in their environment, and they were willing to spend a little more money to make sure that the water was a little bit better when it hit the bays. So we had a letter writing campaign. And we also went door to door, and so I wanted to share this story with you. We had a lot of residents with significant flooding and property damage, and Darrell from EA was with our staff folks when we went door to door, asking them to talk about the damage, asking them to show us receipts, because we needed to be able to demonstrate to those granting agencies the impact, sort of the cost-benefit analysis. Here's the property damage we're experiencing. This is the damage you're going to eliminate. So think about this. We had to go into people's homes that were damaged by flooding and ask them to talk about it in detail. It was really hard. But they stepped up and they did it. They wrote letters, they gave us receipts, and that was part of what helped us get that $2 million. So it wasn't just us and the utility, us being the town government, it was us working with the community, and the community being willing to talk about, to me, a very painful experience when you lose property and you have property damage. That made that a successful application process and got us $2 million. So this is just a summary. We got some money from FEMA. One of the culverts, in fact the culvert we're working on right now, is right next to our electric utility, and so FEMA was willing to give us about $120,000, and I think this was Sandy money that was left over that we got our hands on to help reduce flooding around that area, because during Sandy we did have some water in our utility plant. DNR gave us about $800,000. Again, the focus for that money was a combination of flooding, but immediately they were very interested in water quality. And then we got about $900,000 from HUD, which came to us in the form of a community development block grant. So that's it for me. That's the summary of our Berlin stormwater story, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And if you wanted me to come back and talk to your general manager or answer any questions he might have, just feel free to let me know.
Laura, thank you so much. That was very informative, and I think the intent of this was to just demonstrate our sort of concern and our understanding that there is an issue out there. Again, we want to open some dialogue and figure out, are there any opportunities for us to move forward and address some of the issues that are obviously fresh in our minds based on the rain events from previous. I would ask, in the interest of time, rather than opening the floor up to Laura, if you could reach out to her after the meeting and discuss any potential options with her, I certainly would encourage you to do so.
I can leave my business card.
I want to ask one question while the tape is running. Is the tape still running? You're coming up into a period of time when you are developing your budget. As I understand it, the Ocean Pines budget for this past year, the drainage, is $30,000. I don't know if that's accurate or not, perhaps you can tell me. What I am suggesting is this lady has given us a fantastic story today, a success, a proven record, and a methodology. She has told us exactly what we need to do. And what I am asking you to do is, as you develop your budget, we are not going to be able to move forward on $30,000. It needs to be probably $1 million.
So noted, thank you. I'd also want to point out, yes, sure, go ahead.
Mr. Roder, that's exactly why we asked Ms. Allen to come here today and share Berlin's story with us, to give us possibly a blueprint for what we might be able to do. You have to understand, however, they are a municipality and we're a homeowners association, so that can factor into what we have available to us, but we're very happy that she was able to share Berlin's story with us. Thank you.
Sure, and I left some business cards, so if you want to call me or email me, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you've got. Again, we can come back out when your general manager's on board. Just let me know.
Thank you. So I'd also like to point out, it's in the board packet, and Brett, I think we should be able to get this on the website. It's there. We also got a letter from Worcester County, Mr. Ryan Prescott, the National Resources Inspector. He summarizes some of the events that, he's raising his hand.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to just very briefly introduce myself.
Yeah, go ahead,
Actually, you might want to grab the microphone since it's being recorded.
I just want to be very brief. My name is Darrell Kolar with EA Engineering, Science and Technology. Our local office is right here in Ocean Pines off of Beecham Road. We've been here for about 10 years. It's my honor and privilege to work with the town. They're great to work with and stuff like that. So I just want to let you know, I am right here, available resource. We do a lot of work with the county and stuff inside of Ocean Pines. So reach out to me, I'll leave a business card as well. I just want to let you know that even though a lot of work with the town, I'm right here in your backyard.
Very good, thank you. And yes, please leave your contact information, and certainly we again open it. That's again the intent is to open this dialogue and see where we can go with this. So thank you. So I did want to also point out that we got a letter about the rain event. I think it summarizes some of the things, and that the county is aware of the situation. And again, it's all part of this opening of a dialogue. And also in the package there is a response from Ocean Pines Public Works that has some detail in there. Again, no solutions, but an understanding that we realize that there's a problem, and we're starting to amass an approach to take a look at it in both the short and the long term. Nothing concrete yet, but the conceptual discussions are starting, so that we really, again, the important thing is we're not dismissive of the issue. Can we solve the entire problem? I don't know, but certainly the dialogue will help.
To further the dialogue, I'm wondering if the board can consider reinstituting the drainage committee.
Yeah, excellent idea. As a matter of fact, that email was shared among the board in the past day or so, and I think there's a lot of, and I think somebody's maybe slowing down. We dug up some, and Michelle dug up some information from the drainage committee that had been in place, and maybe it's just been abandoned. But yeah, what a great opportunity for us to go ahead and start that. And I would say, I would charge us that that is part of one of the next things that we have to do. The next task is to kind of get that together. Maybe we discuss it a little bit more in detail by email and have some concrete things where we can get some folks involved in that as well. Any concern with that? I think we should challenge ourselves to do that. Great. Okay.
If I may, in 2005, the Ocean Pines Board of Directors held 16 hours of a drainage symposium, all video, with experts from across the entire state of Maryland, in some cases outside the state. was held at the country club, 2 solid days. What happened as a result, I don't know, but I think some people are asking, what happened, or do we still have the 4 full-time people doing nothing but working on keeping the ditches clean?
Point well taken, Joe. I think that's another sort of historical reference that would probably be very good in these discussions. I think we should, again, open that dialogue, figure out where we are. To answer your other question, I don't know yet, but certainly that may be a byproduct of our discussions. So, let's look at keeping that dialogue open. And again, historical reference may be a very important point in our discussion going forward.
Mr. Chairman, just to comment on what Joe said, we actually did locate a report from the 2005 related to that very event you're talking about. So there is a good synopsis of what took place in the context of that event, as well as the recommendations and what was observed. And that's basically what we're now trying to do, is digest what's already in place and figure out how we go forward with the committee and outreach to the community and get the ball rolling.
To directly answer Joe's question, the 4-person crew, Gavin runs that crew, and that crew still is in place and is working full-time on drainage, but they are maintaining, I believe the number is over 100. It's over 100 miles of drainage.
Did they have that statistic in there?
But that crew is still out actively working, but they do have a fairly immense workload on them, and with the amount of miles they have to cover and it being one crew, and that work is not something where they can have a large production volume of getting to, miles a day. They're dealing with feet per day. It's a tough task for them, and that crew's working very hard to do the best they can on it. And it might just mean that, we need to look at further resources in there beyond that crew that exists already.
Thank you for that information.
Excuse me? What about homeowners maintaining their yards and cleaning them? I got a notice that I was going to be fined because I had a pod delivered because we got flooded, and I had to salvage whatever I could and put in there. If they're looking for that and fining me for that, why can't we fine people for not keeping their yards up?
Yeah, let's take that discussion offline. Right now we're as part of the organization meeting. I do that. Let's chat before we leave today. So seeing nothing else in new business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.